What's up guys, it's Bridget. Welcome back. So today's video is going to be something you guys requested, and this is going to be things that can ruin an eyeshadow palette. Now of course this is just my personal opinion and my personal preferences on eyeshadow palettes, but I feel like when I'm looking for like a very expensive palette, or I'm looking for something I kind of really want but no I don't need, I look for these certain things, and if some of these things are wrong or they don't have this or that, it kind of deters me away because I know I won't be able to use it as a uniform palette in itself, or I have other palettes that have everything I kind of want and need in a palette. So without any further ado, let's jump into the video. As always, all makeup on this channel is cruelty free, and so is everything I mentioned in today's video. So I do want to say I'm back. The hurricane did not hit us as bad as I expected, so I am very grateful for that. Also, I want to give a quick thank you to this Homesick Candle company for sending this candle. Arrived right before the hurricane. I was saving it to burn in case the power went out here because a lot of North Carolina is so damaged right now, and I'm very sad for my home state, and thankfully my area was saved, but I used to live in Kinston and New Bern and all of that, and it is like not okay. Anyways, this is the candle I got sent. Is a North Carolina candle. That was really sweet. It's soy non-toxic, made in America candle. They have one for every state if you live in the US. I just wanted to show it to you real quick because I thought it was perfect timing. It arrived right before the hurricane was about to hit, so I was going to save this like in case I need 60 hours of burn time, which is what this has. This is the candle. It's very cute. I'll leave a link down below. It's not an affiliate link, but yeah. Alright, so let's get into some stuff that can ruin an eyeshadow palette. And of course, again, my opinions on these things, and there are some palettes that I absolutely adore and love that don't have some of these things or have some of these kind of mistakes that I would say, you know, it's just my opinion, but this is what I look for when I look for a perfect eyeshadow palette. Now, first things first is something I always mention when I'm reviewing a palette, and this is a light matte base. It does not have to be a white, it does not have to be a cream, it does not have to be a light beige, it can just be a lighter color, like not white pale, not super creamy, kind of like a middle neutral kind of light shade that is matte. That way if you have your eyelid primer for any skin tone, you can set that eyelid primer so you have a nice base to work off of when you're blending like mattes over the crease and things like that. So if you want to set your eyelid primer, you need a light matte base. My personal preference, if a palette does not have this, it's not good for traveling in my case because I do need to set my eyelid primer, especially if you want to work with a bunch of colors. You're not going to dip into one or two shades in the palette. If you're going to dip into multiple colors, you want to put down a base, that way they're easy to blend together without getting any clumps or anything weird. So that's just my personal preference, but that is number one. Number two is a good shimmer to matte ratio. Now it doesn't have to be shimmers, it can be metallic shades or glitter shades or whatever, but you do need a good ratio of mattes to shimmers. Now if you have hooded eyes like me, you need a lot of mattes in a palette, and of course shimmers are so fun and they can look so pretty. However, if you have one matte and say 7 shimmers in a palette, it's going to be very, very hard for you to use that as one palette and done kind of thing. You're going to have to dip into another palette to kind of build up over the crease area unless you want an all shimmer lid, which is completely fine. But for me, since my eyes are hooded, I put a matte over the crease on the outer corner under the lower lash line. So you want a good proportion of mattes to shimmers. Shimmers can kind of eat up a lot of your color that you put over the crease, and it doesn't look too good if you have smaller eyes. So I do like a good matte to shimmer ratio. Personally, I prefer matte shades because I use them more often, and I might put 1 shimmer or maybe 2 on the lid, but I usually dip into 3 to 4 mattes, so I do like a good matte to shimmer ratio. Number 3 is not having a shade that can deepen up a look. Now, a lot of people prefer like a matte black. A lot of people prefer like a matte chocolate color. I prefer like a dark kind of cool tone brown. It doesn't really matter what the darkening up shade is. A chocolatey brown is fine. Chestnut color is fine. But something to darken up the colors. So if you have, say, the Lorac I Love Brunch palette, they're all pastels. There's nothing that's going to help you deepen up a look, especially if you are of a darker complexion. It's easy to kind of take the darker shade, darken up the outer corner, help blend it into your normal makeup routine. It's very easy to take a darker shade and build it up, make a kind of nighttime look out of a palette. It's easy to make kind of a like more romantic look out of the palette, and it's easy to make a smoky look. So it's easy to just build everything up. You have tons of fun, bright colors. It's awesome. I love bright colors myself, and I love pastels, but there needs to be one color in that palette that can kind of tone it down a little bit if it gets too chalky, too powdery, too light, too pastel. something that works for everybody. You can kind of deepen up whatever look you want to do. Now, I personally don't like black eyeshadow, but I do appreciate it in a palette when it needs it. Okay, so next one is a completely personal preference, but this is really something that's not beginner friendly, and if you are more experienced with makeup, you know how to handle it. But this is wet and squishy and smushy shadows. Now, this happens a lot, and people leave a lot of bad reviews on stuff because they have wet shadows. And what I mean is a lot of time it's like the Huda Beauty Rose Gold and the Huda Beauty Rose Gold Remastered palette, or a lot of these super stock shadows from ColourPop. A lot of them are wet, and you kind of put your finger in there to put it on your lid and you smush and lose half the eyeshadow. It's very wet, very slick, and it doesn't really want to stick where you put it on the lid. It's not very user friendly. I would say it takes a little more time to work with than, say, a regular shimmer, regular metallic, regular glitter kind of shadow. Wet, sticky, slimy shadows can oftentimes hinder a look, and I feel like they make a mess in the pan. They don't look good in the palette, and for me it's just a lot more effort. I'd rather put like a regular shimmer on the lid, but wet shadows can ruin a look. Now, next up is another one that can kind of ruin how someone feels about a palette, and it's not just me that feels that way, and this is small pan sizes or a lot of empty spaces between shadows. Now, if you see certain pans like the Juvia's Place palette, they have huge pan sizes and their colors are very close together. But if you see something like the Alamar palette, there's a lot of empty space, the shadows are not very big, and it feels like you could have had a smaller palette, or they could have added extra shades in there. You don't want too much packaging per product you're getting inside. You don't want a giant palette that you're only getting like 4 little shadows in. It just makes no sense. Economically, it's not good for the environment, and just don't have tiny little pans or really excessively big packaging, because no one wants that. Also, really long and big and bulky palettes, like the Too Faced 20th Anniversary palette, I've heard is so big and bulky. The Lunar Beauty Mani Mouet, I find a very bulky palette, but it's still a very good quality. Again, really excessively large packaging and small pan sizes are something that can really ruin a palette, and it doesn't really seem worth finding the storage space for. So next up is one that's very common, and I feel like this is a very obvious thing to say, and this is going to be hard mattes. And if you don't know what I mean by hard matte, it is a matte shadow that is very hard to dip into, and oftentimes the ones that have kind of like a hard pan that you dink into just to try to get more product off, they don't blend as well. Now, this blending thing could just be certain shadows that I've tried, but for the most part, if something is very hard to get pigment off of, it's very irritating. It can kind of ruin a palette for me, because a lot of times when you're in a rush, you're trying to go to work or you're trying to go to school or something, you want to just dip into your eyeshadow, put it on and go. But with hard pans, it takes a lot more work to get the shadow off of it. A lot of times there's a lot of kickback just trying to dip in, and the bristles kind of pulling up the product. So hard mattes are kind of a hard pass for me. Does that make sense? Now, this next one is something that is a little bit debatable, so you guys can let me know what you think of it in the comment section, and this is too many similar colors. Now, there are a lot of palettes that I love that have kind of a similar color range, but they're not exactly the same. You have like maybe a cool tone brown, a more warm tone brown, and a dark deepening up shade, and a light shade. So you have like 4 different kind of tones. That makes more sense to me than having a bunch of shades that are very similar. So it doesn't make much sense. A lot of Morphe palettes do this. I'm sorry, but they do. They have a lot of very similar shades right next to each other, and in some cases it can be really good for building up a look, like gradually deepening up a look. But you could also do the same thing by going really lightly into the pan, tapping off tons of excess, and you wouldn't need to have pretty much the same shadow duplicated, just barely a little bit different. I feel like it's a waste of time to make the same exact shadows, just like very similar shades, you know? I just feel like, okay, so here's a palette I love, but it does have a lot of similar shades, and this is the Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette. I love the Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette. It's a beautiful freaking palette, and it's amazing, but some of the shades are just too similar. Like, they're very similar shadows. I want some, like, don't waste my time with duplicate shadows. I don't need every color under the rainbow by like every little teeny tiny bit of difference. It's just not, I feel like I'm rambling. You don't need a million different very similar shades, you know what I mean? Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm sorry that last one got kind of rambly. Please let me know something in the comment section down below that has everything you've ever wanted in a palette. For me, a lot of the Juvia's Place palettes, a lot of the ColourPop palettes have a really good ratio of everything I kind of want, along with a light matte base and a darkening up shade. So you guys can let me know what your favorite brand is that has everything in the comment section down below. I love you guys so very much, and I will see you in tomorrow's video. Bye.